Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The ground beneath disappears. Have you ever felt the ground vanish beneath your feet? Not in a literal sense, but in the quiet, shattering way grief takes everything you thought was certain and pulls it away. The world continues. As though nothing happened, neighbors sweep their porches. The morning train still runs on schedule. The cashier asks if you'd like a bag. Life does not stop. Yet inside you, there is silence so heavy it drowns the sound of everything else. Grief is not the tidy sadness we are often told it is. It is raw, contradictory, unpredictable. It comes not just as tears, but as anger, guilt, numbness, and confusion. One moment you feel broken by sorrow, the next you are furious that the person you loved could leave you. At other times, you feel guilty for smiling, for breathing, for carrying on. Grief does not fit into neat categories. It is the collapse of the inner scaffolding on which we had quietly built our identity. Carl Jung once wrote that life's most important experiences are not chosen by us, they choose us. Grief is one of them. Death does not ask for our permission, nor does it consult our schedules. It arrives as it pleases, tearing into our lives with no regard for preparation or control. But Jung also insisted that death is never only an ending. For the soul, it marks the beginning of a symbolic process. Transformation we do not consciously choose yet are compelled to endure. The loss of a loved one does more than rob us of their presence. It unsettles the deepest layers of our being. If that person was your anchor, your sense of security, or the image of the future you longed for, then losing them is not just losing them. Losing every role they played in the story of your life. It is as though you are not only grieving a person, but grieving the parts of yourself that existed in relation to them. This is why grief feels so disorienting. It is not simply absence, it is the collapse of the world you knew. One day you are standing on solid ground, and the next you are falling into an abyss that seems endless. But Jung saw this abyss differently. He believed it was not emptiness, for its own sake, but fertile soil. Pain opens cracks in the surface of the ego, and through those cracks, the deeper self can finally emerge in the stillness of grief. Questions arise that never would have been asked in times of stability. Who am I without this person? What meaning remains in my life? Where do I turn when my foundations are gone? These questions are painful, yes, but they are also creative. They force the soul into a process of reorganization, of silently reweaving meaning from fragments. Yet society does not teach us this. Most people will urge you to move on, to be strong, to distract yourself from your pain. But distraction is not healing. Numbing the wound only deepens the emptiness within. Jung rejected the idea of escaping suffering. He believed the only way out was through. To endure grief with awareness, to truly feel its way to begin the journey toward transformation. If you have felt the presence of the one you lost in a dream, if you have sensed them in the silence, or wondered if there is meaning beyond the pain, then you already know grief is more than sorrow. It is a threshold. The night may seem endless, but hidden within it is the possibility of rebirth. Grief is the dark invitation none of us ever ask for. But once it comes, it demands our attention. It is the place where certainties dissolve, where identities collapse, and where the psyche, if given space, begins its quiet work. Though it feels like devastation, grief is also the first step toward a new way of being, one that does not erase the pain but reshapes the soul around it. And so, the journey begins with a fall, the ground disappears, and the abyss opens. What feels like an end is also the beginning of something the soul has been waiting for, a transformation that only grief can ignite. The dark night of the soul. When Carl Jung spoke of the dark night of the soul, he was not speaking as a detached theorist, but as someone who had walked into the depths of his own psychic collapse. After his break with Freud, his sense of stability shattered. He found himself in a state of near madness, overwhelmed by visions, images, and voices that rose unbidden from the unconscious. Instead of fleeing, he chose to confront them. He began what he later described as a descent into the underworld of the psyche. This descent is the same journey grief forces upon us. To lose someone we love is not just to lose a companion, it is to have the very foundation of our identity ripped away. The world outside may look unchanged, yet the world inside is in ruins. Here, grief reveals its true power, not only to wound, but to transform. In myth and in dreams, the hero must leave the familiar world and enter the realm of shadows. There, they meet monsters, chaos, and terrifying uncertainty. Grief mirrors this mythic journey. The moment loss strikes, we are cast into the labyrinth of our unconscious. Our rational mind, so used to control, fails us. It cannot explain why death arrived, nor can it undo the rupture. All that remains is the invitation to endure, to wander through the darkness until something deeper awakens. Jung discovered this during his own ordeal. In his Red Book, he recorded his visions and dialogues with the images that came to him. They were not logical, nor were they pleasant. They were violent, absurd, chaotic. Yet he listened. He let the unconscious speak in its strange, symbolic language. And in doing so, he uncovered something essential. Pain does not come only to be avoided. It comes to transform us. Grief, from this perspective, is not an accident or an unfortunate detour. It is a rite of passage. It strips us of illusions, dismantles the identities we thought permanent, and hurls us into a psychic landscape where nothing feels certain. It is terrifying precisely because it does not allow us to cling to who we were. The ground is gone, and we are left suspended between the life we knew and a future we cannot yet imagine. In that suspension, the soul begins its work, silent, invisible. It reorganizes meaning. It brings forth forgotten fragments of our being, hidden strengths, and long-buried wounds. It asks us to witness ourselves honestly, without the masks we wore when life felt stable. The darkness is not punishment. It is preparation. To enter the dark night of the soul is to be undone. It is to surrender the false belief that we can control life or that our identities are unshakable. This undoing is painful, yes, but it is also the soil from which renewal can grow. Just as the seed must break open in the earth before new life can emerge, must the human psyche crack under the weight of loss before it can be reborn into authenticity. Many people try to resist this descent. They distract themselves with work, with noise, with endless movement. But grief waits. It does not vanish when ignored. It only grows heavier in silence. To walk through the dark night is to choose courage over avoidance. To trust that what feels like annihilation may also carry within it the promise of rebirth. This is why Jung saw grief not as pathology, but as initiation. It is the soul demanding that we grow. It is the underworld we must pass through if we wish to emerge transformed. And though the journey is lonely, though the path feels endless, those who endure discover something extraordinary. Out of the darkest soil, the deepest, light is born. The illusion of control. We live in a culture that worships control. From an early age, we are told to organize, to plan, to manage, to anticipate. Order is celebrated. Vulnerability is shamed. To admit uncertainty is to admit weakness. And so, we create schedules, routines, and systems that give us the illusion of safety. We cling to the belief that if we try hard enough, we can manage not only our time, but also our emotions, our relationships, even the unfolding of life itself. But then comes death. Quiet, cold, indifferent. It does not knock at the door to ask permission, nor does it consult our calendar. It enters without warning, dismantling every plan, every defense, every illusion. And with it, grief arrives not as a gentle visitor, but as a force of demolition. Everything we thought was stable collapses. The tidy frameworks we use to understand life no longer make sense. We are left stunned, powerless, undone. This is why grief is so devastating. Not only removes the person we love, it removes our sense of mastery over existence. No amount of discipline, planning, or foresight can prevent the shattering. We discover, often with horror, that we are not in control. We never were. Yet Jung insisted that this collapse is not a mistake. It is a calling. Grief is the unconscious demanding to be heard. The ego, our rational, organizing self, is weakened in mourning. In that fragility, the deeper layers of the psyche rise to the surface. Dreams grow vivid. Old memories break through. Strange emotions flare up with disproportionate force. We feel anxiety, rage, despair, or sudden joy with an intensity we cannot explain. These are not failures of strength. They are the language of the soul. Long silenced beneath layers of control, seizes the opportunity to speak. It does not speak in neat sentences. It speaks in symbols, images, sensations. A dream of a collapsing house. The memory of a childhood room. The image of a door opening onto darkness. Each carries meaning, though not the kind logic can dissect. Temptation is to resist, to rationalize, to shove these experiences back into silence. We say to ourselves, I must be strong. I must move on. Must not break down. But in doing so, we deny the very process of healing. Warned that what we repress does not disappear, festers. It returns later, disguised as illness, emotional blockages, repeating patterns of suffering. To avoid grief is to delay its work, to guarantee its return with even greater force. The truth is that mourning requires surrender. Not passive resignation, but courageous yielding. To admit that we are powerless before certain forces of life is not weakness, is honesty. It is the recognition that there are mysteries greater than our plans, depths greater than our reason. Dreams, Jung believed, are among our greatest allies here. When the ego can no longer hold the weight of grief, the unconscious offers symbolic images to help us process the loss. In dreams, we may encounter the one who has passed not as they were, but as a transformed presence. They may guide, comfort, accuse, or simply appear. These encounters may feel more real than waking life, for they carry the emotional truth the conscious mind cannot yet bear to grieve. Then is to relinquish the illusion of control and step into dialogue with the unconscious. It is to allow what rises rage, guilt, sorrow, tenderness to be felt without judgment. It is to listen when dreams speak, when memory stirs, when the body trembles with emotions we cannot name. This is not a failure of strength, but the beginning of wisdom, because in the end, grief teaches us what control never could, that the soul has its own timing, its own wisdom, its own path toward healing. And if we dare to listen, if we dare to surrender, we may discover that beneath the ruins of control lies something deeper, more enduring the self, waiting to be born anew. Dreams, shadows, and symbols. As grief deepens, something remarkable begins to happen in the psyche. The unconscious, no longer silenced by the ego's illusions of control, steps forward. It does not announce itself with logic or tidy explanations. Instead, it speaks in dreams, in images, in sensations that feel strange and often unsettling. For Jung, dreams were not random. They were messages, symbolic attempts by the unconscious to communicate what consciousness could not yet bear to articulate. During mourning, dreams often intensify. They grow vivid, haunting, sometimes painfully real. They may bring us face to face with the departed, not as they once were, but as archetypal figures. They may appear as guides, shadows, messengers, or even accusers. Each appearance carries meaning, though never in a way that can be reduced to simple interpretation. The grieving soul may dream of cemeteries, dark oceans, collapsing houses, or silent animals. These are not arbitrary images. They are symbols born from the deepest layers of the psyche, attempting to weave order out of chaos. Jung warned that symbols are not meant to be explained away. They are meant to be experienced, to be lived with, to be felt. Their power lies precisely in what cannot be fully translated into words. But alongside dreams comes something even more challenging: the shadow. Grief strips us bare, tearing away social roles and defenses, leaving us exposed. In that exposure, the shadow rises. The shadow, as Jung described, is the collection of everything we repress, the impulses, emotions, and truths we have condemned as unacceptable. In ordinary life, the shadow lurks in the background, projecting itself onto others. But in grief, when the ego weakens, the shadow pushes through. Suddenly, feelings we did not expect surge up. Anger at the deceased for leaving us, guilt for words unspoken, resentment toward those who still live untouched by loss, even envy of their joy. Many try to bury these feelings, ashamed of them. How could I be angry at someone I love? How could I resent others while mourning? Yet Jung warned that what we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves gains silent control over us. To deny the shadow is to give it power. Grief is brutal in this sense. It forces us to confront not only the absence of the other, but also the hidden corners of our own being. It whispers, "Look at what you have always avoided. Look at the loneliness, the fear of abandonment, the unfinished stories you carried." In this confrontation lies danger, yes, but also possibility. The shadow is not only darkness, it is also a doorway. To face it is to take the first steps toward individuation. The process of becoming whole. Jung did not see the shadow as an enemy. He saw it as a neglected part of ourselves waiting to be integrated. Grief, in breaking us open, creates the conditions for this encounter. Pain reveals what we were not willing to see before. And though it is frightening, though the ego resists, this confrontation can mark the beginning of profound transformation. The dreams and symbols of mourning are therefore not distractions from grief. They are the very material of healing. To write them down, to reflect on them, to sit with their strangeness, is to allow the unconscious to do its work. Through these symbols, through the shadows, whispers, the psyche is reorganizing itself. It is trying to restore balance, to lead us beyond collapse, toward a truer, more authentic existence. The descent is not easy. The monsters of the underworld are real, though they are born from within us. But if we have the courage to face them, we can accept the images, the emotions, the uncomfortable truths. Something begins to shift. Grief ceases to be only suffering. It becomes revelation. And in that revelation lies the possibility of rebirth. From suffering to rebirth, there is a moment within grief where something begins to change. The pain does not disappear, and perhaps it never fully will, but its texture shifts. What once felt like a sharp, unbearable wound slowly begins to take on a new form. It is still heavy, still tender, but now it carries something more than despair. It carries the first seeds of transformation. Jung saw this as the threshold of psychic rebirth. At first, grief dismantles us. It shatters identities, illusions, and certainties. But when we resist the urge to flee, when we allow ourselves to feel the suffering fully, something deeper begins to emerge. This emergence is not a return to normal. The old normal is gone. Instead, it is the birth of a new way of being in the world, one more conscious, more authentic, more whole. This rebirth can take many forms. For some, it awakens creativity. For others, it deepens compassion. It may draw someone toward spirituality, toward service, toward a new purpose. What matters is not what emerges, but that it comes from within rather than from the illusions we once clung to. The soul, having been broken open by grief, reorganizes itself around truths that were hidden. Before Jung himself lived this. After the death of his wife Emma, he did not merely carry her memory, he began to encounter her in dreams as a symbolic figure. She was not the Emma he had known in life, but an archetype, a guide, a presence that urged him deeper into himself. Through these dreams, Jung found a way to continue the relationship in a transformed manner. Death had taken her physical presence, but it had also opened a door to a different, symbolic bond. This is what grief teaches us when we do not turn away, that absence can become presence of another kind. Memory ceases to be only an open wound and becomes fertile soil. The loved one we lost is not erased, but reborn within us, reshaping our inner life, guiding us in ways we could not have imagined before the loss. But this rebirth does not come automatically. It requires surrender, not resignation, but the willingness to let grief do its work. It requires silence, presence, and patience with the soul's mysterious timing. The ego may want quick answers, a neat recovery, a clear end to the pain. But the soul works differently. It weaves slowly, carefully, through symbols, through dreams, through the shadow and the silence. For those who walk alongside someone in mourning, the greatest gift is not advice or solutions, but presence. To sit in silence, to listen without judgment, to offer a hand without forcing the other to move faster than their soul allows. This is the true support grief requires. Words like "it will pass" or "everything happens for a reason" only cheapen the depth of the experience. Better to say nothing, or simply, "I am here. Tell me what hurts." Grief is, in the end, a solitary journey. No one can walk it for us, but we do not have to walk it without witnesses. And when we find those rare souls willing to stand beside us, not to erase our pain, but to honor it, the path becomes more bearable. The truth is, grief does not destroy us. It remakes us. It burns away illusions, shatters false identities, and reveals what lies beneath. Out of the ashes, something new is born, not because we have overcome the pain, but because we have allowed it to shape us. The pain becomes part of us, yes. But so too does the depth, the compassion, the awareness it awakens. We are not who we were before. That self is gone with the loss. But there is a new self gestating in the womb of darkness, waiting to emerge with different eyes, with a deeper heart, with the courage to live more truthfully. Grief is not the end. It is the threshold of rebirth. And though the journey is hard, though it demands more of us than we think we can bear, it carries within it the most profound gift of all, the chance to become who we truly are.